الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We completed the discussion on the chain of this narration that is numbered as number 2, and we explained it's actually a continuation of the first sanad. So Urwa quotes from Aisha radiyallahu anha, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يصلي العصر. She explains about the Asar Prayer. So this is the prayer that is prayed closer towards the evening. There are different meanings for this word Asar. So we will quote some of the literal meanings because probably they will also impact the time of this prayer. So the first meaning is it refers to the later portion of the afternoon, which is closer towards the evening. قال ابن عباس العصر ما يلي المغرب من النهار. This is in لسان العرب, volume 4, page 575. So the first meaning of Asr is the later portion of the afternoon that is closer to the evening. The second meaning of Asr is to squeeze. So Imam Darqutni rahimahullah narrated from our Sanad to Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, إِنَّمَا سُمِّيَتُ الْعَصْرِ لِتُعَصَّرْ. So it's called Asr because it is squeezed. So he narrates from Mus'ab ibn Muhammad, who narrates from one person that أخر طاووس العصر جدا. One day Tawus, he delayed Asr a lot. So someone came and asked him, how are you delaying Asr so much? So he said, إنما سميت العصر لتعصر. The reason why it's from the very name, it's squeezed. So squeezing means that it is delayed, that it's like becoming tight. You're doing it right towards the end of the time. Therefore, Imam Muhammad rahimahullah, he writes in his Muwaṭṭa, وَقَدْ قَالَ بَعْضُ الْفُقَهَاءِ إِنَّمَا سُمِّيَتُ الْعَصْرَ لِأَنَّهَا تُعَصَّرْ وَتُؤَخَّرْ. That some jurists have said that it is called Asar just let me know, then we'll have to cancel the lesson. So saying that Imam Muhammad rahimahullah, he writes in his Muwaṭṭa that وقد قال بعض الفقهاء إنما سخر. Okay, so is the voice back right now? This is back. I don't want to be talking and then no one can hear me. Okay, so see, you say you can? Yeah. Okay, if it continues to break, then just let me know. Then we'll just have to cancel the classes. So we are saying Imam Muhammad rahimahullah, he writes in his Muwaṭṭa, وقد قال بعض الفقهاء إنما سميت العصر لأنها تعصر وتؤخر. That some of the fuqaha, they mentioned that it is called Asr because it is delayed and it's squeezed and it is delayed. So that's the second meaning. Then the third meaning, it also comes in the general meaning of a day and night. And this is especially when it is used in the dual. In Lisan al-Arab, it is mentioned, وَالْعَصْرَانِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. So Asran, you see, it's using it in a dual, so it comes in a meaning of al-layl and al-nahar. In Islah al-Mantiq, it is specified to the morning and evening. You call al-Asran al-Ghada wal-Ashi. And then they quote from Humayd. So قال حميد بن نور ولي يلبث العصران يوم وليلة إذا طلب أن يدركا ما تيممه. So you can see here it comes in a meaning of a day and it comes in a meaning of morning and evening. And Jawhari, he also mentioned والعصران أيضا الغداء والعشي ومنه سميت صلاة العصر, that it refers to the morning and the evening, and this is how Asr gets the name, that the prayer of Asr gets the name. Alama Jazari, firstly Alama Jawhari rahimahullah, he mentions an as-sahaf al-lugha that wal asran aydan al-ghada wal ashi, and Alama Jazari rahimahullah, he also quotes this meaning. So it refers to the morning and the evening. This is when you're using it in the dual. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed Asar. والشمس. Now she uses the word wa. So the waw here is for hal. والواو في والشمس للحال. That's what Allama Badruddin Aini mentions in his commentary of Sunan Abi Dawud, volume 2, page 267. So the waw is for hal. That means whilst at the sun. Now she uses the word shams. So in order not to convert this into a lesson of science, it makes sense to rather quote the meaning of shams from a more recent dictionary. So the compilers of Mu'jam al-Wasit, they defined shams as النجم الرئيس الذي تدور حوله الأرض وسائر كواكب المجموعة الشمسية. So it is the main star which the earth orbits around it. So you know that the earth, it rotates on its axis once a day and it revolves in orbit around the sun in 365 days, isn't it? To be more precise, 365 days, 6 hours and 9 minutes. So that 6 hours and 9 minutes adds up, and that is how you get the leap year every 4 years. So the earth is the third planet from the sun, from the Shams. Now, the sun has a radius of over 696,000 kilometers. Again, to be more specific, 6,900, 600. 96,340 kilometers. Diameter, it's 1,391,109 base of the sun. And the circumference of the sun is about 4,378,000 kilometers. So that raises the question that now, how can such a huge star come into the room that she's saying والشمس في حجرتها? How can such a huge star come into the room? So the answer is very logical, that every person would understand that she does not refer to the actual sun, rather it refers to the light of the sun. And it is very common to use the word sun to refer to sunlight. Allama Azim Abadi, he explains, وَالْمُرَادُ بِالشَّمْسِ ضَوْءُهَا, that the sunlight was shining. Where was it shining? فِي حُجْرَتِهَا. So it was shining في حجرتها. Now what is the meaning of Hajjara? So we might think it's simple, that we just translate this as the room and we can carry on. But there are so many differences on the meaning of this word Hajjara, and this has a direct impact on the meaning of what Aisha radiallahu anha is trying to say. And therefore we need to discuss the differences. So you can put your heading there, the explanations on the word Hajjara. We're now going to explain all about the word Hajjara. So the first meaning of Hajjara, in his commentary of Sahih Muslim, Qadi Iyad, he explains the meaning of Hajjara as something that is surrounded by walls. وَكُلُّ مَا حُجِرَ وَأُحِيطَ بِهِ الْبَنَاء وَأُحِيطَ بِهِ الْبَنَاء فَهُوَ حُجْرَةٌ. This is in إكمال المعلم بفوائد Muslim, volume 2, page 568. So anything that is barred and surrounded by walls, that is called a Hajjara. Now, what do you understand from this here? That if you are only going to take this meaning of Ikmalul Mu'lim, he's mentioning that anything that is surrounded by walls. So you have a piece of land, put 4 walls around it, it's called Hajjara. But in English, what are you going to call it? You're going to call it a yard, isn't it? Put 4 walls around a piece of land, it's called a yard. So basically, how is he explaining Hajjara? He's explaining it to mean a yard. Likewise, the great grammarian Ibn Sa'id al-Yawsi, he also explained, إِنَّ كُلَّ بَنَاءٍ أَحَاطَ بِهِ حَائِطٌ وَهُوَ حُجْرَةٌ. This is in Mushkilat Muwaṭṭa Malik ibn Anas on page 36. That any building that is surrounded by walls is a Hajjara. So basically both of them, Qadi Iyad and Ibn Sa'id al-Yawsi, they are suggesting that the meaning of Hajjara refers to a yard. Allama al-Yawsi rahimahullah, he then explains the linguistics of this word. So he says, هو مشتق من قولهم حجرت الشيء إذا منعته. He's saying that it's derived from the word حجرت, and حجرت means to prevent. So right there as your topic, as your heading, linguistic meanings of the word Hajjara. The first meaning is to prevent. So right, linguistic meanings. Number 1, to prevent. Hajarta, a mana'ata, to prevent. Then the second meaning which he gives is وحجر القمر إذا صارت حوله دارة سميت بذلك لأنها تمنع من دخلها من أن يوصل إليه ومن أن يرى. So the second meaning is that it refers to the ring around the moon. And this year it's called the lunar halo. Basically, it's a reflection of the ice crystals in the sun clouds. So this is the second meaning of the word Hajar. Hajar al-Qamar is the ring around the moon. So these are two meanings from which the word Hujra could be derived. Now please leave a line, because inshallah just now I'll give you a third literal meaning. So that's why you have two literal meanings which have been quoted from Allama al-Yawsi, and just now I'll give you one literal meaning that is quoted by Ibn Abdul Barr. So the first literal meaning is to prevent. The second literal meaning is the ring around the moon, the lunar halo. So from these two explanations that I presented now, you can understand that Hujra refers to a fence yard. It maybe refers to a courtyard, because they don't mention anything about a roof, isn't? So in your notes, you must have this here written that the Maliki scholar Qadi Iyad and the Arabic grammarian Ibn Said Batal-Yawsi, both of them explain the Hujra to mean a yard. They simply defined a Hujra as anything that is surrounded by walls, and they do not make any mention of a roof. So therefore, Mullah Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahimahullah in Al-Arf al-Shadhi, in his commentary of Tirmidhi, he mentions Al-Hujra huwa bina'un ghayr musaqqaf. That Hujra refers to a building which does not have a roof. That means it refers to a courtyard. Wal-baytu huwa al-bana'ul musaqqaf. And bayt, that is a bana'ul musaqqaf. So that's the meaning that they presented. So the point to keep in mind for now is that Hujra does not necessarily have a roof. However, in At-Tamheed, Allama Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, he explains that Hujra is a dar. What's a dar? So you know that dar refers to a house has a roof. So if Hujra is referring to dar, then it means that Hujra is a house, and a house has a roof. So Allama Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, he said, وَالْحُجْرَةُ الدَّارُ وَكُلُّ مَا أَحَاطَ فَهُوَ حُجْرَةٌ. That this is the meaning of Hujra. Hujra refers to a dar. Now, by considering a Hujra to be a dar, it would mean that there is a roof. So this is going to now differ. But now a Hujra cannot refer to a whole big house. It cannot refer to a huge mansion. Therefore, we interpret dar to refer to a ghurfa. So in Balagha, this here is called Majaz al-Mursal al-Kulliya. Now what's Majaz al-Mursal al-Kulliya? It is tasmiyatul kull wa yuradu biha al-juz. That you mention an entire thing, but you only intend a portion of the thing. So an example of this here is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَجْعَلُونَ أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ. That they thrust their fingers in their ears. So the word finger is used, but it refers to the tips of the finger. It cannot refer to the whole finger. How can you put the whole finger into the ears? It's not going to. But actually, if you really look at it, we can actually also take the literal meaning, because in those times, Hujra, the entire dar was the size of a ghurfa, isn't? So therefore, we can say that it's referring to a dar, but the size of their dar, which was the size of a ghurfa, which was very small. So nevertheless, you have Allama Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, who's defining Hujra as dar. And he intends to say, by saying that it's a dar, he intends to say that it is actually referring to a ghurfa. So now, and then Allama Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, so I told you that he gives a different meaning from which it could be derived. So that's why we mentioned two meanings. So the one was that it's derived from the word حجرتها to prevent. And the second is that it's derived from the lunar halo, that ring which is around the moon. So now he presents a third meaning. And what is this here? وأصل الحجرة مأخوذ من التحجير. تقول حجرت على نفسي إذا أحط عليها بحائط. It refers, so from the literal meaning, it refers to putting four walls around. So now, Allama Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah is saying that the literal meaning of it is also that it refers to surrounding something with four walls. But now why Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah is mentioning that it refers to a dar? So why are we confining it to a small room? How are we saying that it refers to a small room? When he mentioned dar, and we know dar refers to a big house. So why are we saying that it is majazul mursal al-kulliyah? Why don't we just accept that it refers to a house? It could refer to a mansion. It can refer to a palace, irrespective of how big or small that house is. So the reason why we are referring it to a small house is because of considering what the other commentators mentioned. For example, Ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah used this very word ad-dar, but then he explains that it is narrow and small. So in Al-Masalik he wrote, وَالْحُجْرَةَ الدَّارِ إِذَا كَانَتْ ضَيِّقَةً. That Hajjara refers to a very small and narrow house. So he used the word dar, but he's mentioning that it refers to a very small house. So because he's saying that it refers to a small house, so then Allama Zurqani rahimahullah, he simply mentioned that it refers to a bayt. والشمس في حجرتها بضم الحاء المهملة وسكون الجيم أي بيتها. That it refers to the a bayt. So it refers to a very small house. And therefore, Sharif Abul Qasim, he also clearly defined it as a room, because a small house, a bayt, refers to a room. So he mentions in Amal al-Murtada, والحجر بضم الحاء وفتح الجيم جمع حجرة بالضم أي الغرفة. So can you see? The point is that according to these commentators, Hajjara refers to land that is surrounded by walls. So what's the meaning of Hajjara? It's a land that is surrounded by walls. Now, it could be such that it has a roof. If it has a roof, it's going to be referred to a room. Or it could be such that it does not have. So now, this is the point that we note thus far. Now, the quality that we want to focus on is the size of this land. It is ignore the fact that it has, whether it has a roof or whether it does not have a roof. We are just now concentrating on the size. So whether it had a roof, so whether it was a room or whether it was a courtyard, it was really small in length and it was also small in breadth. To determine how small it was, we have to explore other narrations. Do we have other reports, other āḥadīth, other narrations which tells us how small this was? Because was there anyone who witnessed it, who saw it in the time, and they can then mention to us, they can give us some information on the dimensions. So there are a few narrations that we find. The one comes in Musnad Ahmad. This very same narration, it's transmitted by the nephew of Hisham. So this time I didn't tell you to draw those chains like how I told you last time, because this time you have to figure it out yourself. So last time I told you how we draw from all the students of Imam Zuhri for the first narration, and then we explained yesterday that many narrated the second portion alone. So from amongst those who narrated this, only the second portion is Hisham ibn Urwa. So Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he quotes the sanad. حدثنا عامر بن صالح بن عبد الله بن عروة بن الزبير بن العوام أبو الحارث قال حدثني هشام بن عروة عن أبيه عن عائشة. You can see this doesn't Imam Zuhri rahimahullah It has absolutely nothing to do with that incident of Urwa telling it to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Nevertheless, he's quoting from Aisha radiyallahu anha that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam كان يصلي العصر والشمس لم تخرج من حجرتها. So don't worry about that point, we'll come back to it. وكان الجدار بسطة, and the walls were short. Now to show how short it was, the narrator Amir, the ustad of Imam Ahmad, he lifted his hand just to show that it was a hand's span. That is how short the walls were. So he simply raised his hand, and he means that, if you have to put his hand up, then his palm would be higher than the wall. So this here is one narration which we have to indicate to us and to show us the size of the Hajjara. Then in Musnad Ahmad, so that is in volume 43, page 392 of Musnad Ahmad. So like I told you, that you give it to you in the plate, that you have to read through so many volumes to get that report. Then the second is that in his Musannaf, Alama Abdul Razak rahimahullah, he narrates from Ibrahim ibn Muhammad, who also narrates from Hisham. So the sanad goes, Abdul Razak an Ibrahim ibn Muhammad an Hisham ibn Urwa an Abihi an Aisha قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي العصر حين تخرج الشمس من حجرتي وكان حجرتي بسطة. So she also used the word basta. Basta is referring to the length. So the length of the Hujrah. So both of them are using the word basta. Now to explain what this meaning of this word basta, so Mullah Yunus Saharan Puri, Mullah Yunus John Puri rahimahullah, who passed away very recently, and I told you that we have ijāzāt from him as well. So he used a text which comes in Al-Majmu'. So Majmu' is a book in the Shafi fiqh. He used a text from there to explain what's the meaning of basta. In this text, it actually is concerning the depths of the grave. But since the same word was used, it applies to this narration as well. So the explanation of basta is given in Al-Majmu' is ومعنى القامة والبسطة أن يقف فيه رجل معتدل القامة. That a person of average height, he stands ويرفع يديه إلى فوق رأسه, and then he raises his hand as much as possible ما أمكنه. So that's what's the meaning of basta. Then he mentions that وقدر أصحابنا القامة والبسطة بأربعة أذرع ونصف. هذا هو المشهور بقدرهما. So he's saying that it's about 4.5 cubits. That is the amount of a basta. So these narrators, they are mentioning 4.5 cubits, that you just raise your hand and it will be higher than the wall. So 4.5 cubits, that's the length of the Hujrah. This meaning is strengthened by what Alama ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah narrated, what his sanatu Hasan Basri. Hasan Basri said, كنت أدخل بيوت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنا محتمل كنت أدخل بيوت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأنا محتلم وأنال سقفها بيدي. That he's saying that I was like around the age of puberty. So that also gives you an indication to the height. So that's why it's an important word which is mentioned. And I would raise my hands and I would be able to touch the roof. And he mentions that وَذَلِكَ فِي خِلَافَةِ عُثْمَانَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ. So it is on this basis that Alama ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah mentions in a Tamheed in volume 5 on page 397, وفي هذا الحديث دليل على قصر بنيانهم واختصارهم فيه لأن الحديث إنما قصر به تعجيل العصر. So this is the meaning that he is taking, that when Aisha radiallahu anha is mentioning later on about the sun coming in the room, which we are going to discuss inshallah, then she's basically trying to show how small and how short these rooms was, talking about the length, that you just go stand in there and you raise your hands and you're touching, your hands are higher than the walls. And then we said that it's possible that there was a roof, or it's possible that there wasn't a roof in the Hujrah. If there was a roof, you just raise your hands and your hand is touching the roof. And if there was, if Hujrah refers to the courtyard, it means you raise your hands and your hands are higher than the walls. So now we know the length, from the floor upwards, the length of the room. And now we also want to know what's the width of the room. That how many square meters was the floor space of the room. So in his commentary of Sahih Muslim, Imam Nawawi rahmallah, he says, وكانت الحجرة ضيقة العرض قصيرة الجدار بحيث يكون طول الجدار أقل من مساحة العرض بشيء يسير. So it basically mentions that the floor space was just as short as the walls. So now we have we know that the floor space was also small and the walls were also short. Now assuming that we're taking the meaning here of bait. So now we understand what's the meaning of bait. So you know that famous narration of Aisha radiallahu anha that it comes in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim that kuntu anamu bayna yaday Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wa rijlaya fi qiblatihi, that I would perform salah, I would be sleeping and my feet, my legs would be in the qibla of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. فإذا سجد غمزني, when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam wanted to make sajda, he would touch me. He would make an ishara to me. Now there's the whole explanation whether he would actually touch and then whether that breaks wudu, etc. Whether he would just make a sign, etc. فَقَبَضْتُ رِجْلِي, and then I would pull my legs in. وَإِذَا قَامَ بَسَطْتُهُمَا, and when the Prophet ﷺ would stand again, then I would stretch out my legs. Now this word ghamazani, the reason why the Hanafis, I told you there's the whole explanation, because she didn't mention وَالْبُيُوتِ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَيْسَ فِيهَا مَصَابِيحٌ. So if there are no masabih, like now I don't have any misbah, I can't see anything here. In the same way, if Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam merely make an indication, then she would not be able to see it. So you see right now when I'm teaching this here, we teaching it with resembling the darkness of what she was what they were experiencing at that time. But it shows how small the room was. That it was around 4.5 cubits, and that is why the Prophet ﷺ, he could not even find space to make sajda, and he had to actually indicate to Aisha radiallahu anha, he had to touch her so that she had to pull her legs in so that there could be room for him to make sajda. But it could also be slightly more, because in that room there was also other items, isn't it? It wasn't just an empty room in which the Prophet ﷺ was praying. Rather, there were other items as well. So please let me know if the sound is going. I hope I'm not teaching for nothing. I just see Rocha. Okay, inshallah. So I need to, if the sound is going or if it's not very clear, then tell me, then we'll just cancel the lesson. So is mentioning that it's clear, alhamdulillah. Okay, so is mentioned she's saying that she had to pull her legs in, but we're saying that there were other items in that room as well. So therefore, it might have been even more than 4.5 cubits. So for this year, we need now to explore more. We need to explore further. So then we find in Adabul Mufrad, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, he narrated with a sanad which links to Dawood ibn Qais. So Dawood ibn Qais, he says, رأيت الحجرات من جريد النخل مغشاة من جار. He's saying that I saw the hujurat. So he's using the word hujurat. He's explaining what's hujurat. Now pay attention to this here very, very clearly, because this here is going to be very, very strong evidence for the Hanafis. So he's saying, remember I said Imam Bukhari transmitted this here with an authentic chain. So he's saying رأيت الحجرات من جريد النخل مغشاة من خارج بمسوح الشعر وأظن عرض البيت من باب الحجرة إلى باب البيت نحو من 6 أو 7 ذروع. He's saying that from the Hajjara until the Bayt, I would estimate that there were 6 to 7 cubits. Now for easy maths, let us just consider a cubit as half a meter straight. Because you know a cubit is actually 0.5334 meters, isn't it? Okay, let us actually work on the exact amount. So he's saying that the door of the Hujra to the Bayt, if you're sharp, you may have already picked up one point here. If you're not sharp, I'll tell you the point just now. He's saying the door of the Hujra to the Bayt was 6 to 7 cubits. Actually, is there anyone who managed to pick up a point from the statement? That he's saying the door from the, in light of what I explained thus far, and now he's saying that وَأَظُنُّ عَرْضَ الْبَيْتِ مِنْ بَابِ الْحُجْرَةِ إِلَى بَابِ الْبَيْتِ. Did you pick up anything from there? Yes, perfect. Yes. So Hajjara, you can see this here. It's clearly from this narration we're understanding, mashallah, that the Hajjara is different from the Bayt. So Hajjara is going to refer to the courtyard. So he's saying that وَأَظُنُّ عَرْضَ الْبَيْتِ مِنْ بَابِ الْحُجْرَةِ إِلَى بَابِ الْبَيْتِ. So you can understand the depths of the Hanafis. Can you understand the depths of the Hanafis? The Hanafis, even in a narrow room, they have vast understanding. So look at how much knowledge of Hadith Hanafi ulama had. Inshallah, we'll explain all of this tomorrow. But nevertheless, for now, you can just understand that how they didn't just look at the apparent meaning. They had so much different proofs. And you can see Anwar Shah Kashmiri made it a point to mention that the Hujra doesn't have a roof. So nevertheless, he's saying that, so I said we work it out exactly. So from the door of the Hujra to the Bayt is 6 to 7 cubits. So that's about 3.20 to 3.73 meters. Imagine how small that was. You can see how small it was. And then he said that he estimates the inner portion to be about 10 cubits. So that's about 5.33 meters. That was the inner size of the house. So that one point, mashallah, you'll all managed to pick it up, is that the Hujra and the Bayt is separate. And then also he concludes this narration here, and keep this point also in mind, that he says, وَوَقَفْتُ عِنْدَ بَابِ عَائِشَةَ فَإِذَا هُوَ مُسْتَقْبِلُ الْمَغْرِبِ, that I stood by the door of the room of Aisha radiallahu anha, and it was facing the west. So this here is a very important point. So now you can write down the summary so that it becomes easy to understand. So the first point, if you weren't writing, then write the first point, that it could be referring to a courtyard or it could be referring to a room. That's point number one. Point number two, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah transmitted with an authentic chain narration which shows that there is a distinction between the Hujra and the Bayt. So this strengthens that the Hujra refers to a courtyard. Point number three, the walls were so low that a person, if he had to raise his hands, the palm of his hands, the fingertips would be higher than the wall. Point number four, the room itself was so small that it was around only 5 meters. So about less than 10 cubits, just around 5 meters, less than 5 meters. So you can understand how small the room itself was. And point number five, the door was facing the west. How do you still think you can just open Sahih al-Bukhari, look at the narration, to think, okay, fi hujratiha, in the room, carry on, this here is proof, and carry on reading. Can you see how much depth you have to go into for every narration, how you have to analyze every report? You can't just open one kitab, read one hadith just like that and assume that you can understand it. Take the common meaning today of Hajjara. You need to understand all of these points. Now we look at the next word. So Aisha radiallahu anha said, fi hujratiha. So what is she saying? In her room. Who's narrating this here? Aisha radiallahu anha. But what sigha she's using? She's using the ghaib sigha. So she's using the word ha, and ha is for a third person, isn't? So now who is this third person? Is she talking of one of her co-wives? Is she talking about another female? So Mullah Zakaria Kanlawi rahmallah, he explains in Awjazul Masalik, volume 1, page 268, وَالضَّمِيرُ إِلَىٰ عَائِشَةَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهَا عَبَّرَتْ عَنْ نَفْسِهَا بِغَائِبٍ. That does dhamir ha is referring to Aisha radiallahu anha, but she referred to herself using the ghaib sigha. She referred to herself in the third person. So in Umdatul Qari, Alama Badruddin Aini rahimahullah, he wrote that he mentions that here when she's saying وَكَانَ الْقِيَاسِ أَيْ يُقَالْ مِنْ حُجْرَتِي, that logically or according to the law, the general principle, she ought to say min hujrati because she's talking of her own room. However, she used the word hujratiha, in her room. So in Balagha, this here is it comes under the chapter of iltifat. If those of you who studied Balagha, you check under the chapter of iltifat. And you know in the Quran, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ رَبُّكَ, your Lord, لِلْمَلَائِكَ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ, verily I. It's called iltifat. It ought to be either وَإِذْ قُلْتُ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ, isn't, instead of وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ. So this is an example from Quran. To show you an example from poetry, I told you that everything we are going to show from poetry as well. So Allama Busayri rahimahullah said, أَمِنْ تَذَكُّرِ جِيرَانٍ بِذِي سَلَمِهِ مزجت دمعا جرى من مقلة بدمي. Do any of you know where this poetry comes? Okay, so this here is the opening. Yes, mashallah. Allah mazid fazid. Yes, so it's the opening words of Qasida Burda. So you can see he's talking to himself, is talking about himself, isn't? So now using the third person, this here subtly hints either to the modesty of Aisha radiallahu anha. That's why she's referring, she's mentioning it in the third person, or it refers to the humility of Aisha radiallahu anha. She didn't want to show off that, you know, I'm the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, etc. So the humility of Aisha radiallahu anha. But it also, so that it subtly indicates to that, and it also clearly shows her expertise in lugha. You remember yesterday we quoted from Tirmidhi the statement of Musa ibn Talha, "Ma ra'aytu ahadan afsaha min Aisha." When it says "Ma ra'aytu ahadan," who was he comparing? Obviously, if you're comparing with Chinese and then you say I didn't find anyone who's better in English than this person from England, then is there any kamal in that? No, because they don't know nothing in English. But here is comparing with those who are masters in Arabic, and then he's saying that "Ma ra'aytu ahadan afsaha min Aisha." Then the next words are قبل أن تظهر. So this here, the apparent meaning of ظهر is to be apparent. The apparent meaning of ظهر is to be apparent. You notice what happened? So this here we call it a Sheikh Zab style. Those of you who studied in Darul Mazadwal, you know that Fazlur Rahman, he likes to play around and phrase sentences like this. The apparent meaning of ظهر is to be apparent. So it means before the sun could become apparent. Now a person will ask that, okay, the sun becomes apparent. So the sun is apparent throughout the day, isn't? 11 o'clock in the morning, you go outside. 7 o'clock in the morning, you go outside. Okay, now this is for South Africa. After the sun rises, you go outside and you will see the sun. So the sun is apparent. Whether you go in the afternoon, the sun is apparent, as long as it's not cloudy. So what does it mean that قبل أن تظهر? So does it mean that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would perform Asar before sunrise? No, that can't be the meaning. So for this now you need to understand the various meanings of the word قبل أن تظهر. So there are going to be 4 meanings. So now you can write down meaning number 1. The first meaning is to rise up and to ascend. ظهر comes in the meaning of to rise up and to ascend. So Allama Khattabi rahimahullah, he preferred this meaning. So in his commentary of Sunan Abi Dawud, in Ma'alim al-Sunan, he in volume 1 on page 112, he said, قوله قبل أن تظهر معنى الظهور ها هنا الصعود. That the meaning of ظهور is صعود, to rise up, to go up. So it means it ascended. And then he gives a proof for this here, that in Arabic you can say ظهرت على شيء إذا علوته. That when you go up, when you ascend something, then you can say ظهرت عليه. You can use the word ظهرتم. And he says that this verse, this also comes in the Quran in verse number 33 of Surah Zukhruf. وَمَعَارِجَ عَلَيْهَا يَظْهَرُونَ. That they had stairs on which they would climb up. So they would climb up the stairs. So you can see the word يَظْهَرُونَ is used. So this is what Allama Khattabi rahimahullah mentioned in Ma'alim al-Sunan. And he mentions it with absolute certainty. Likewise in another kitab of his, in Gharib al-Hadith, there he said that يريد that قبل أن ترتفع وتصعد إلى شعف الجدر. It means that before it could rise to the top of the walls. Now, how can the sunlight rise to the top of the walls? This again is now going to mean the morning. So therefore, if you're taking this meaning, if you're considering this first meaning of ظهر, then it refers to the shadow. So Ibn Battal rahimahullah, he first mentions the question, the objection, that والشمس طائرة على كل شيء من أول طلوعها إلى غروبها. So from the morning, as long as it's not cloudy, you can see from sunrise till sunset, the sun rises. So that means now you can see the sun. Some people, they like to go and take photos of the sunrise. Then you're walking home from the masjid after Ishraq, you can clearly see the sun. So from sunrise right up until sunset, there are those who like to take pictures of sunset. You're going for Maghrib Salah, you're getting a little bit late, you can see the sun setting. So the sun is apparent throughout the day. Thereafter he explains, أنها أرادت الفيء في حجرتها. She is intending the shadow. So can you understand? If you're taking this first meaning of ascend and to rise up, then it refers to the shadow. So أنها أرادت الفيء في حجرتها قبل أن تعلو على البيوت. Now how do we know that she is referring to the shadow? So فكنت بالشمس عن الفيء لأن الفيء عن الشمس يكون. Now the Arabs, they look at the source of a thing and then they attribute another thing to the source. So from where you get the shadow, what causes the shadow? It's the sunlight. That you have to have sunlight. Then if something blocks that sunlight, then that's how you get a shadow, isn't it? So because a shadow is derived from a sunlight, so therefore you can refer to the sunlight also. You can refer to shadow also as the sunlight. So this here figuratively, you you mention the sun, but you mean the shadow. And he mentions there's a lot of examples like this here in Arabic. كما يسمى العرب النبت ندي. That the Arabs, they call plants dew. Why they call it dew? Because it originates. Likewise, rain, from where does rain come? Rain comes from the sky. So, تسمى المطر السماء. So they will even call a rain sama. They'll call rain the sky. Why? Because لأنه من السماء ينزل. Because the rain is coming down from the sky. So Arabs look at the origin and then they refer to the derivative, that what derived from that, they refer to that by the same word. And in Balagha, this here is called مجاز المرسل المسببية. مجاز المرسل المسببية. So this here is if you're taking the second meaning. So we mentioned that Allama Khattabi rahimahullah preferred this. Now let's look at the other Maliki scholars. So Ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah, he also presented the same meaning and the same explanation. اللفظ الأول قوله قبل أن تظهر قيل معناه قبل أن يظهر الظل على الجدار. Before the shadows could come onto the walls. يريد قبل أن ترتفع ظل حجرتها على جدارها. Thereafter he mentions وكل شيء على شيئا فقد ظهر. قال الله تعالى. He now mentions another verse of the Quran. فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه. So this here is verse number 97 of Surah Kahf. أي يعلوه. It means it ascends. And thereafter he then Qadi Iyaz, he then cites another meaning for this. So all this here is in Al-Masalik fi Sharh Muwaṭṭa Malik and page 368. So he says وقال الهروي في قوله لم تظهر أي لم تعلو السطح. That it does not go above. ومنه قوله تعالى, and then he mentions that these verses of the Quran. Likewise, he also mentions the Ja'di, some poetry. بلغنا السماء مجدنا وجدودنا وإنا لنرجو فوق ذلك مظهرا. That we reached the sky, we elevated in rank our honor and our fortune, and we certainly hope to even elevate beyond that. So you can see وإنا لنرجو فوق ذلك مظهرا, to go higher than that. So the second scholar is Ibn al-Arabi. Now write the third scholar, he is Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah. So he also preferred this meaning in التمهيد. فمعناه قبل أن يظهر الظل على الجدار يريد قبل أن ترتفع ظل حجرتها على جدرها وكل شيء على شيء فقد ظهر. قال الله عز وجل فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه وما استطاعوا له نقبا أي يعلو عليه. This here is in التمهيد. And Ibn Sir Batal-Yawsi, he also explained. So it's in التمهيد in volume 8, page 97. Can you see again how the importance of doing the reference? That in the Muwaṭṭa it's the second narration, and Tamheed is the commentary of the Muwaṭṭa. But where it is, it's not in the first volume. It's there hidden away. And if you're going to try to Google it, like I told you, you're not going to find it, because I don't think that this copy is on the internet. I don't know. It's not my feed, but I'm just telling you. Probably you won't find it. Maybe you will find it if you got better searching skills, which probably you would have. So it's in volume 8, page 97. So that's the third scholar. So it's the third Maliki scholar. Then Ibn Sid Batal-Yawsi, he also explained this meaning. ظهر الرجل فوق السطح. Did you say ظهر الرجل فوق السطح? أي يظهر إذا علاه, when a person goes above it. So now why? He then explains the logistics of it. He's saying that وإنما قيل ذلك لأنه إذا على فوقه ظهر شخصه لمن يتأمله. If you go high up on the roof, people will be able to see you, isn't? So you become apparent for everybody. So therefore, it's called ظهر comes in the meaning of to go up. So this is the meaning which he gives. So from this here, you can see that there are 4 scholars who took this meaning. So I hope you got their names written. Allama Khattabi, Allama Ibn Abdul Barr, Allama Ibn al-Arabi, and Ibn Sid Batal Yawsi. Now, if you're going to come to the latter-day commentaries, then you're going to find many commentators. They are also preferring this. So whether it's the commentaries of Sahihain or whether it's the commentaries of the Muwaṭṭa, but we go back to the original. So for us, it's these 4 that matter. It's no use I go to you 100 names now. You just know that they're all taking from these 4. So these are the 4 main people who quoted, who claim that Zahara comes in the meaning of to ascend, and then they interpret it to mean the shadow goes up on the walls. Now this meaning which they are taking, it has support. So Sufyan ibn Uyayna, when he is quoting it from Imam Zuhri, so this narration comes in Bukhari and Muslim, then he uses these words, that كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي صلاة العصر والشمس طالعة في حجرتي. So can you see mentioning that والشمس طالعة في حجرتي? So this here supports these 4 scholars who are taking the meaning of ascend. Now taking this meaning of Zahara and then coupling with the meaning of Hajjara, that they're saying that the Hajjara is short walls and a very small room, it would mean that according to these scholars, they understand it, that it's going to mean that Asar Salah was prayed very early. So Allama Khattabi rahimahullah, he explains, وَحُجْرَةُ عَائِشَةَ ضيقة الرقعة والشمس تقلص عنها سريعا فلا يكون مصليا العصر قبل أن تصعد الشمس عنها إلا وقد بكر بها. This means that Asr Salah was performed very early. So because they take this meaning and then looking at the meaning of Hujrah, that is how they understand this hadith. So that's the one meaning of the word قبل أن تظهر. The second meaning now, so right, number 2, it means to emerge and to come out. So write that down, to emerge and to come out. This is the second meaning. So Ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah, he mentions it with the word قيل. قيل معناه حتى يخرج الظل من قاعة الحجرة. So from the inner portion, like the hall, you know, قاعة means hall. So the inner portion of the room, it comes out, the shadow comes out. وكل شيء خرج فقد ظهر. Anything that comes out, you say ظهر. Because when something comes out, it now becomes apparent. So like you know how Batal Yawsi explained, when you go up, you become apparent. Likewise, when you come out, if I'm sitting in my house and someone comes stands outside my house, will they be able to see me? No. But if I walk outside my house, now I'm apparent. People can see me. So if you come out, so therefore, this is the one meaning of the word ظهر. Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, he also cited this meaning here, and he also mentioned it with the word قيل. وقيل معناه أن يخرج الظل من قاعة حجرها وكل شيء خرج فقد ظهر. Both of them, they used the word qila, which indicates to some weakness. But there are words of Sahih al-Bukhari which could indicate that this here, that this meaning could be preferred. So if you look in Sahih al-Bukhari, now this here again, it has nothing to do with this narration of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, of Urwa telling it to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Rather, it's being narrated independently, and we explained all of this yesterday. Imam Bukhari says, حدثنا إبراهيم بن المنذر قال حدثنا أنس بن عياض عن هشام عن أبيه. So it's not even via Imam Zuhri, it's عن هشام عن أبيه. So if you want to, you could have written Hisham as a mutabi' for Imam Zuhri. Both of them are narrating from Urwa. So when he mentions the siyah, and he says, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي العصر والشمس لم تخرج من حجرتها. So والشمس لم تخرج. So can you see? The word لم تخرج is clearly used. Now whether you take this meaning or whether you don't want to take this meaning, in Fath al-Bari, Ibn Hajar rahmallah explained that it doesn't make any difference. In South Africa, we say same difference. So it's same difference. So فهذا الظهور غير ذلك الظهور. ومحصله أن المراد بظهور الشمس خروجها من الحجرة وبظهور الفي انبساطه في الحجرة وليس بين الروايتين اختلاف. So he's saying that no matter which meaning you take in, it's coming to the same meaning. That if you are saying that it means to emerge, to come out, then it refers to the sunlight coming out of the room. And if you say that it refers to the shadow, now what shadow? Shadow is darkness. It's the absence of sunlight, isn't it? So it's same meaning, exactly the same meaning. In both ways, you're getting darkness. Now, whether you're calling it darkness because there's no sun, or whether you're calling it shadow, the ultimate thing is that I can say we're going through darkness right now. Or I can say that there's a shadow over the sun, and that is why the whole of South Africa is engulfed and all these countries here are engulfed in darkness. So whether you're calling it darkness, whether you're calling it shadow, it's same difference. It doesn't make any difference. So based on this meaning, the sunlight is going to come out of the room much earlier according to them. So they say that even before that the sunlight can come out of the room, before you can have the shadows on the wall and before the sunlight can come out of the room, Asar Salah was performed. Therefore, it means that Asar Salah was performed super early. So that's the second meaning. The third meaning is to overpower. So right there, number 3, overpower. Now, Allama Khattabi in his Gharib al-Hadith, he quotes, قال محمد بن إسحاق لم يظهر أي لم يغلب الفيء على الشمس. So the word ظهر comes in a meaning of غلبة. But then Allama Khattabi رحمه الله, he dismisses this meaning and he says فليس هذا عندي بالوجه لأن الفيء وقت العصر في الأبنية لا محالة أغلب من الشمس وإنما معناه لم يصعد الفيء. So he prefers that meaning of يصعد rather. But this meaning of overpower, it actually, you could say that it refers directly back to that first meaning. The first meaning was to ascend. So if you go to the book Tafsir Gharib Ma Fi Sahih, Tafsir Gharib Ma, sorry, Tafsir Gharib Ma Fi Sahihain al-Bukhari wa Muslim by Ibn Fatuh al-Humaydi, he mentions there that wa aslu dhuhur al-irtifa' wal-ghalaba. That the asal meaning of dhuhur is irtifa' and ghalaba. So both comes in the same meaning, whether you want to say go up, ascend, or whether you want to say overpower. Because a person can overpower when they ascend, isn't when they're up, when they're higher. Then, so whether they have higher power, no matter in which way they are higher, that is how they can overpower. So this third meaning, you can just link it up to the first meaning. So that's the third meaning of qabla an tadhhar. Then the fourth meaning is to go or to remove. So Allama Ibn Sir al-Batalyosi, he mentions this as one of the meanings. ظهر منك شيء إذا زال وذهب. That إذا زال, when something is removed or وذهب, or it's gone, then you use the word ظهر. So from the Maliki scholars, Allama Abul Walid al-Baji, he preferred this meaning. So you must write his name, that he preferred this meaning. So he mentions in his commentary, وقولها قبل أن تظهر قيل معناه تذهب وأنشدوا في ذلك. And he mentions this poetry to prove this here. وتلك شكاة ظاهر عنك عارها. That is disgrace, the blemish of it will go away. You know the disgrace, when you when a person is disgraced, then he blemished, isn't? So mention ظاهر عنك عارها, that the blemish will go away. Now before citing the same poem, Allama Zurqani rahimahullah, he said وقيل تظهر بمعنى تزول عنها كما قال وتلك شكاة ظاهر عنك عارها. Now this here is again poetry to express one's feelings, to express one's love. And this here shows also that imagine these poets, they're expressing their feelings, they're showing their love. But today we are using their poetry to establish Arabic. And this is how it's going to be as much as we go through any commentary of Hadith and even commentary of the Quran, verses of poetry which was said to express love. So look at this entire poem. هل الدهر إلا ليلة ونهارها وإلا طلوع الشمس ثم غيارها أبى القلب إلا عمرو وأصبحت تحرق ناري بالشكاة ونارها وعيرها الواشون أني أحبها وتلك شكاة ظاهر عنك عارها فلا يهنأ الواشون أني هجرتها وأظلم دوني ليلها ونهارها فإن أعتذر منها فإني مكذب وإن تعتذر يردد عليها اعتذارها. So can you see it's poetry for love which is being quoted, but we are using this poetry, the commentators rather, instead of saying we, Allama Abul Walid Baji and Allama Zurqani, etc. They're using these kinds of poetry to understand the meaning of Hadith. So that's the greatness of the Arabic poetry. They sell it to express their feelings, and we are getting the explanation of words which comes in āḥadīth. Now, despite preferring this meaning of going and removing, Allama Abul Walid, then he also acknowledges that the first meaning is strong. So he acknowledges it, but then he claims that both of them are similar. So he says, قِيلَ مَعْنَى تَظْهَرْ تَعْلُو. So that's the first meaning, isn't it? وتصير على ظهر الحجرة قال الله تعالى فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه. Thereafter he says والمعنيان متقاربان. The both meanings are the same. And thereafter he mentions وروى حبيب عن مالك قال معناه أن الشمس في الأرض لم تبلغ الجدار أي لم تظهر فيه. So these are 4 meanings of the word ظهر. Now there are other words also which are used in this narration. So for example, that narration of Sufyan ibn Uyayna. So in that it comes in Bukhari and Muslim, والشمس طالعة في حجرتي لم تظهر. So the sun was shining or was raised in my room, and the shadow is not yet extended. And likewise, you have that same narration which I quoted from Musnad Ahmad. So it goes with this, the whole lineage there. حدثنا عامر بن صالح بن عبد الله بن عروة بن الزبير بن العوام أبو الحارث قال حدثني هشام بن عروة عن أبيه عن عائشة. Such a simple sanad to memorize. If you make this chart, you'll understand. You know that when you're in final year, you think that a person who knows 10 asanid, mashallah, he knows so much. Once you start to do takhassus and you start to make these charts and that, you realize that it's just normal. That you know the person like that, you know a person's name. If maybe taking your class in school or in madrasa, there's 5 students. Now one day this person done something first and another person done it second, third, fourth. You'll be able, without going home and trying to memorize it, you'll be able to say the names in order. Next day, maybe in a different order. That's what another student came out first. You'll be able to say it in order. So it's an asanid. I always mention this here, that it's something which comes naturally. You don't have to learn asanid. You have to just learn about the narrators, and you have to just know that who are the main students, etc. And then automatically you'll know the sanad. So now this here, you automatically will know it. Amir ibn Salih is narrating from Hisham ibn Urwa, narrating from his father Urwa, narrating from Aisha. Simple, without even trying to memorize it. So simple. So this is in Musnad Ahmad. So here the wording comes: كان يصلي العصر والشمس لم تخرج من حجرتها وكان الجدار بسطة. And then in Sahih Muslim, Waqi', he narrates from Hisham. So if you got your chart, you can put there Hisham. Now you got Waqi', and you got Amir ibn Salih. So you can see how you got all of these. So he mentions والشمس بيضاء في قعر حجرتي طالعة. And then Imam Tahawi rahimahullah, he quotes it with the following wording: لم يفئ الفيء بعد. The shadow had not yet extended. So you have all of these different wordings. So the outcome, Qadi Iyad, he claims that no matter which wording you're going to take, the outcome, now Qadi Iyad is obviously a Maliki. So he's mentioning that the outcome is going to be the same. والمعاني متقاربة وكل راجعا إلى أن الفي لم يعم الحجرة حتى ارتفع على حيطانها وبقيت الشمس على الجدر. So this is what he mentions in Masharik al-Anwar in volume 1 on page 330. So irrespective of which wording you're taking, the other madhahib, they felt that this narration refers to hastening with the Asar Salam. So Imam Bayhaqi rahimahullah in his Sunan al-Kubra, he says قال الشافعي عقيب حديث مالك, that after quoting this hadith of Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said هذا من أبين ما روي في أول الوقت. That this here is the most emphatic narration to show us the starting time of Asar. Now look again, you don't just take the apparent, look at how many points you have to look at. Imam Shafi'i is trying to be like a Hanafiya and use other points. لأن حجر أزواج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في موضع منخفض من المدينة وليست بالواسعة. So he's saying that it's situated in a lower part of Medina. So taking into consideration this point here. But this here is actually a Hanafis who mastered this of taking into consideration all of these points. So Imam Shafi, he tried, but he got this one point. Hanafis managed to get lots of other points as well. So he understood that it refers to performing the Asar Salah earlier. And then Alama Ibn al-Arabi rahimahullah, he explains that this is the very same reason why Imam Malik rahimahullah is mentioning this narration here, that إنما أدخل مالك رضي الله عنه هذا الحديث وقصد به تبيين تعجيل صلاة العصر وذلك إنما يكون مع قصر الحيطان. So the reason why Imam Malik is mentioning this is to show you that they perform the Asr Salah very early. And Qadi Iyad rahimahullah says وإنما كان فيه دليل على التعجيل من جهة أن الحجرة إذا كانت ضيقة أسرع ارتفاع الشمس منها ولم تكن موجودة فيها إلا والشمس مرتفعة في الأفق. كذا قال الهروي. So this is in إكمال المعلم. So this all shows that it refers to the Asr Salah being performed very early. So Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he explains that because now the word kana is used here. So أن حديث عائشة يشعر بمواظبته على صلاة العصر في أول الوقت. That Aisha radiallahu anha, this narration, it indicates that this was the standard practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would perform his Asr Salah earlier. Inshallah, tomorrow we will discuss. First, we'll quote it from the fiqh books of the other madhab, because you cannot quote a ruling of you cannot quote a ruling of a madhab from books of commentaries of hadith. So we'll quote it from the books of fiqh, and thereafter we'll discuss the Hanafi ruling, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.